Since my hands-on with Lords of the Fallen in London a little over a month ago, there has been some huge changes, improvements and additions to the game. CI Games have also very kindly provided me with an early copy, so I've been able to deep dive further into the gameplay, the lore and the mechanics, and bring you a true and honest first impressions of how Lords of the Fallen is shaping up. But first, in case you did miss my preview video from the London event, here's a recap of the story overview. After an age of the cruelest tyranny, the demon god Adir was finally defeated by mankind's greatest heroes, the Judges. But gods do not fall forever, and so was formed the Hallow Sentinels to stand vigil for signs of his return. This holy brotherhood erected magnificent beacons throughout the kingdom to repress any last remnant of the demon god's malignance, as his colossal corpse rotted underground. But even death in all its sublime finality could not silence the fallen god, and in time, Adir's noxious whispers pervaded the earth once more. Enticing those that had sworn to oppose him, the sentinels fell, and with it, so were the beacons corrupted. Adir's demon hordes ravaged the lands, cleaving a path of bloodshed through which their great lord might ascend. Now, after centuries of warfare, the demon god's resurrection draws nigh. Humanity's only hope of survival lies with the Church of Aureus, disciples of the Radiant God, Adir's arch-nemesis. This devout union recently unearthed a device of ungodly power, a lantern that grants its bearer the ability to cross between the realm of the living and that of the dead. Though sacrilegious by its very nature, the Church has no choice but to bestow this black art upon their most devout and ferocious of champions, the Dark Crusaders, as a last desperate attempt to destroy Adir. Only they who shun the light to fight the darkness possess the power to defy a god. As one of the fabled Dark Crusaders, you must embark on an epic quest to overthrow Adir, the demon god. Using the power of this mysterious lantern, you can explore two vast parallel worlds, Axiom, the realm of the living, and Umbral, the realm of the dead. You alone have the power, but more importantly the fortitude, to shun the light and not only walk in the darkness, but also wield it against all manner of horrors and fight back against the demon god himself. As a Dark Crusader, you are an unholy abomination and everything the Church of Aureus stands against, but you are also their last resort. And with the ability to learn all schools of magic, including Umbral, magic literally conjured from the realm of death itself, and even Rogar, the infernal and fiery magic of which Adir himself is the very source. You must use every single sacrilegious power at your disposal to rid the land of evil and defy the demon god. That is the story in a nutshell. For me personally, it holds much promise. This sounds so incredible. I have a bunch of thoughts and opinions, but I'll save them to the end of the video as we move into the next section. Now that you're caught up on the overarching story, let's go over the more significant mechanics that make Lords of the Fallen so unique in comparison to other Souls-likes. Firstly, and most obviously, you have got Axiom and Umbral, the realms of the living and the dead respectively. And due to the fact that you are the bearer of the lamp, you can interact with these worlds in various different ways. And you will be doing so very frequently if you want to stay alive and progress through the game. Through raising your lamp, you can stay in the realm of the living and just peer through into Umbral to see if there is any hidden loot or secrets that you need to interact with, and this will help to inform your next decision as to whether you are going to need to sacrifice yourself and plunge your body into Umbral, the realm of the dead. And though there are, of course, many more secrets in the realm of the dead, it made me very happy to see that both realms hold secrets, and you are going to need to scour every area in both realms to ensure you don't miss anything. And of course, voluntarily sacrificing a life and plunging yourself into Umbral does mean that you no longer have that safety net of a second life. So before every tough encounter, you are definitely going to want to try and find a vestige and ensure you encounter that enemy or that boss in Axiom to give yourself one final attempt should you fall and be reborn in Umbral. And I love that if you do happen upon an enemy in the Realm of the Dead whilst you are still in Axiom and you're just holding up the lamp to see what's around you, if that enemy notices you and attacks you, you will immediately be dragged into their realm with them. And the developers were not lying when they said Umbral is very high risk and very high reward. There is so much more loot in this realm. However, the longer you spend here, the tougher enemies will become and the more numerous they will become. Your healing is also not as effective, only restoring a portion of your health, with a further portion being withered health. This health can be regained through attacking enemies. However, if you are hit, you will immediately lose all withered health. The final two game mechanics I wanted to mention that really make Lords of the Fallen stand out on its own are the Avenge system and the co-op system. There are many rare currencies in this game, and if you are to ever see one of these lanterns on the floor, make sure you interact with it and go and hunt down the enemy that it leads you to. This is a revenge enemy, and though they will be insanely powerful, if you do manage to defeat them, you will get a rare currency needed to buy some very cool items. And the last mechanic I wanted to talk about for the moment is the seamless co-op. That's right, Lords of the Fallen does have seamless co-op. It's not like most other Souls-likes in that you will summon a player just before a boss, and as soon as that boss is defeated, the player will despawn again. So, should you wish, you can play the full game side by side with a friend. Though please do note, the progress will only be saved in the host's world. But all this really means is you get to experience this incredible game twice in both of your worlds. Now that you're aware of the majority of the overarching mechanics, let's deep dive into things like the combat, magic, and so much more. Let's now talk about the combat in Lords of the Fallen. And I want to kick off this section by stressing that this is a very challenging, very unforgiving game. But please, please do not let that put you off. All of my gameplay footage you're seeing at the moment is just the first couple of hours of the game, up until the second main boss, the Congregator of Flesh. And throughout the entirety of all of these sections, I never really felt like I knew what I was doing. However, now that I've tried a few different builds and gone through a couple of times, at probably around the 10 to 15 hour mark, it all just started clicking. And when you stick with it and let yourself learn the combat, I cannot stress enough how good this game then starts to make you feel. Initially, it can be daunting because there is a lot of controls, even more so than most other Souls-likes, because you're also switching between your lantern, your ranged weapon, your catalyst, your different stances, whether or not you want your shield and how you want to parry, whether you prefer dodging over blocking. There is so much to focus on and remember all the time that it can be really daunting at first. But I promise you, do not let that put you off, because when it starts to click, you feel like an absolute god. Even now, having roughly 30 to 35 hours in this game, I still sometimes forget to use my Soulflake charges or apply buffs to my weapons, because the game is so good at giving you so many tools and allowing you to tackle every single encounter however you want, that sometimes you genuinely just forget exactly how many tools you have available to you. And when you are more experienced and you do remember everything on offer to you all the time, you can have so much fun with this game. Soul flaying especially is a mechanic that it took me far too long to remember to use frequently, especially because of the fact that you can actually use it to drag enemies around. And for instance, if you press the left thumbstick to the left or the right whilst you are soul flaying, you will push the enemy's soul in that direction, and you can quite literally just shove them off a bridge and into a canyon. It is wonderful. And then don't even get me started on ranged weapons. You've got bows, crossbows, throwing weapons, catalysts, spells, both Radiant and Inferno, and then Umbral as well. And all of these can be equipped with 3 or 4 different ammo types and spells. Honestly, the possibilities are endless. And I know that all probably sounded quite daunting having not played the game yourself yet, but it's really worth spending the time to learn it. Because it will become second nature, trust me. It won't feel like a chore, and when you really start to understand it all, it makes for a really, really wonderful gameplay experience. And the more familiar you become with combat, the more you will find yourself willingly spending longer and longer in Umbral, because it's just so much easier to make sure you're not missing anything. And on top of that, there are many sources that will allow you to regain withered health and make your healing last longer. But I can feel myself going into guide mode. It's just what I do. This is just a first impressions. It's going to stay as a first impressions. I will bring you a guide closer to the release date. I don't want to start chucking tips and tricks at you now when you can't even play the game yet. So I'll hold my tongue and we'll talk more about withered health when the game comes out and I can actually create a guide for you. Before we move into the next section, I feel like I haven't talked about parrying or the sound design enough. Every attack, every move, every action in this game feels so weighty without being clunky, and the sounds really back it up. Parrying in particular is really satisfying. And the fact that you can see how close enemies are to staggering when you're locked onto them, smack bang in the middle of their body, makes it a really fluid and easy system to use. I've never been one for parrying in Souls games. I always end up resorting to dodging because I don't usually spend the time to learn how to become a parry god. With how fun the gameplay in Lords of the Fallen is, it made me want to spend the time to learn to get good at parrying. And it's so genuinely rewarding when you do. The sounds, the animations, everything about it is just so fun. So this is a call to action for everyone here who, like me, prefers dodging over parrying. Just give it a go. That's all I can ask of you. Just give it a go. You won't regret it. One system that I have barely used yet, honestly, is magic. And primarily that's just because I'm having so much fun with all the other weapons in the game. Eventually, I really do want to become familiar with every single spell, every single weapon, every single buff in the game. But there's so much that I want to do and so many things I want to try out that I've just been neglecting magic. So far, all I've really been using up until this point is this incredibly far-ranged and this incredibly accurate fireball. And I must say, even though these spellcaster classes do start very squishy, they are really generous with how much mana you get. I think we calculated on stream, link to that VOD below, that at base level, straight out of character creation, the Pyrrhic cultist could cast 22 fireballs before running out of mana. And even then, the items to replenish your mana are very cheap to buy and plentiful. So there are definitely tons and tons of options when it comes to your build, and you will be spoiled for choice both in melee and in ranged, specifically magic. Before we move on to my final thoughts and some criticisms, let me play you another segment from my hands-on preview as I break down the lore behind each of the 3 schools of magic, because it's really genuinely interesting, even for someone like me who usually isn't that interested in lore. So enjoy this and I'll meet you back here in a minute. 3 schools of magic exist in Mornstead: Rogar, Radiant, and Umbral, each specializing in a different area of the magical spectrum and each requiring a different catalyst to cast. Alongside standard attacks, you can map up to 4 additional magic skills to your controller for immediate access. As you can see here, using an Xbox controller as an example, they are bound to RB, RT, Y, and X. This not only allows for far greater combat variety with the ability to string together an almost endless number of combos, but rapidly speeds up combat, reducing the need to swap out your abilities. Now let's take a look at the magics themselves. Rogar is infernal magic, characterized by highly destructive pyromantic sorcery. The source of Rogar is Adir, the demon god himself, the infernal architect, and he would grant Rogar's dire boons to all who would commit unspeakable atrocities and suffering in his name. Rogar is amazing for crowd control and area of effect. Rogar magic is also very costly, but allows you to conjure powerful and varied magical attacks. But do keep in mind that the fire that the Rogar wield is accursed and not natural, causing a build-up of an affliction named Ignite that can have explosive outcomes. So if you choose to specialize in this school of magic, use it cautiously and wisely. Next up is the School of Radiant, the source of which is Aureus the Everlasting, who accepts sacrifices of blood through which the devout can manifest searing light. However, Radiant magic is not void of suffering. A subtype of the holy magic, Aureus worshippers call upon his divine might by bleeding themselves, their blood becoming the conduit to the divine searing radiance. While Radiance can still be very effectively used for damage output, it also includes a great number of support and healing spells, such as direct buffs, auras, or consecrating the ground around you with various effects, making it an ideal choice for co-op based playthroughs. Self-flagellation and the paradigm of stigmata are widely spread among the Orient faithful. As such, the magical projectiles often take the shape of swords, thorns, and other elements evoking castigation. The light of Aureus is nothing but unnatural, and exposure to it yields the buildup of an affliction called Smite. And finally, we now take a look at Umbral magic, the source of which is completely unknown and is said to be so ancient and horrid that its secret is probably best left undiscovered. Should they choose to, players can unearth the secrets of the Umbral in the bowels of the mountain. Such outworldly powers come with a heavy price, however, skewing the minds and bodies of the mortals that drink deep from it, turning them into thralls and pawns of the antediluvian entities. Umbral magic causes a distinct form of damage called Wither, and if you remember from earlier, that means that this synergizes very well with the powers of the Lantern and Soul Flaying. While the damage output is much higher, the recipient can recover some of the lost HP by landing successful hits within a period of time. Umbral also caters to the Death Knight or Necromancer fantasy with its eerie ectoplasmic manifestations, moths, and decay. And true to the trope, Umbral magic is rare, forbidden, and saps the vigor of the living. Now that you understand more of what the game has to offer, let me give you my thoughts and my criticisms from my time with the game. As I'm wrapping up this video, I must say that I have been actively patching this every single day for us to make sure it's as perfect as can be on launch. One thing I'm not a huge fan of is the fact that you can't switch between multiple weapons on the fly. You have your left-hand weapon, your right-hand weapon, and your ranged weapon, and that is it. You're not going to be able to switch these out mid-combat unless you get very fast at menuing. So if I want to be able to dual wield 2 axes for certain enemies, but I know there's a tough enemy in this group who I have got very good at parrying, I'm not going to be able to quickly switch to and from my shield. It is one or the other. I have to make that choice before going into an encounter. And equally, you can't switch between a bow and a magic catalyst, or a throwing weapon and a magic catalyst. Either you have your fire spells out, or you have your throwing axes out. There's no switching between the two, unless, again, you get very good and very fast at using your menu. I would ideally like the option to switch to at least one other weapon. In Elden Ring, you can have 6 weapons at once you can juggle between, and it's a very similar situation with most other action RPGs as well. Though, that being said, I do understand it is because there is just so many controls in this game, with the introduction of the lamp as well. and needing to have all of the lamp's functionalities also tied to controls, it leaves very limited options left for stuff like weapon swapping. And as we are talking about the lamp, again, because of that, you cannot have both the lamp and your ranged weapon equipped. So it happens far too frequently, at least for me, where I will accidentally end up burning through some of my ammo because I think I've got the lamp equipped and there is an effigy or a vestige that I want to interact with, and I end up accidentally shooting it with my bow or my fireball, wasting a load of time and wasting a load of ammo before then switching back to my lamp and trying again. This harkens back to the start of the video. Hopefully that will become less prominent the more and more familiar you become with the controls. But there is a few buttons that have been mapped a little bit inefficiently, and I feel like if the mapping was tweaked, it would allow room for more weapons and or weapon switching. And finally, something that I initially thought was a really cool idea, but now it just frustrates me, is the fact that most lore and item descriptions are tied behind Radiance and Inferno. So if you're not a spellcaster, you are going to miss out on so much lore in this game. However, I believe the developers have already confirmed that they also feel they might have gone a little bit over the top with exactly how high your stat requirements have to be to discover these item descriptions, and exactly how many item descriptions are tied behind your stats. So I believe at launch that requirement may be loosened up a bit and might not be as much of a problem. And one final very important thing that I'm surprised I haven't touched on more yet up to this point is the actual difficulty of the game. I really enjoy that every single encounter in this game is tough, and you need to respect every single enemy. It really helps to prepare you for the challenging boss fights. The enemies in this game are all challenging and have all already been demanding your full attention. So when you get to the particularly tough boss fights, it doesn't feel like this really garish increase in difficulty. Yes, of course, they are much harder. You're probably going to die a few times. But you're already in try-hard mode because the whole game demands it from you. And you have steeled yourself and you're ready for any challenge it throws at you. And of course, the boss fights themselves are just gorgeous. There are so many gritty, dark, and disturbing, yet hauntingly beautiful enemies and environments in this game, and I truly love it. It's definitely my favorite Souls-like of recent times. And my friends, that is it for my first impressions of the first few hours of the Lords of the Fallen. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already, because I have plenty of guides on the way when the game releases, as well as the return of my much-loved Things You Missed series. And with that being said, my friends, all that's left for me to say is thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an amazing day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.